What's up, guys? Toad back again off of a 1-1 day yesterday, but it wound up being a slight win because the Atlanta Falcons hit on the money line, baby. I mean, they were covering, I think, basically wire to wire in that game, but they got the money line cover right at the end after the Eagles had chances to put that game away. Saquon Barkley had another drop that probably could have been a touchdown that would have completely ended me, and then Kirk Cousins, the guy who no longer sucks in prime time, I guess, led a pretty quick drive down the field. A few just big passes, basically, to get them all the way down. They get a touchdown. Coverage was terrible. Yeah, that's right. The coverage on that pass to London was terrible at the end there. Honestly, it looked like the refs were trying to help the Eagles a little bit, though. Like, there was a pretty questionable no call on what I think could have been pass interference in the end zone on the third down play there on that Falcons winning drive there. Didn't even matter because then the Falcons threw a touchdown pass anyway to Drake London, and nobody was covering him. It was crazy. There was nobody even that close to him. Easy touchdown, easy throw and catch, backyard throw and catch, baby. And then London celebrates, huge touchdown. Like, you're basically going to win the game if you kick the extra point. Huge touchdown, and he gets flagged. 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct. I mean, come on, man. It's just home cooking, basically. The refs, that flag was just ridiculous. Sending the PAT back to like a 48-yard attempt or something like that. But, of course, Younghoe Koo is a pretty talented kicker, and he was able to get the job done anyway to get the Falcons the win there. And then I did lose on the baseball play, that under. What can you do? Joey Estes didn't do very well, gave up some runs early. And then for the later portion of that game, I think no runs got scored. I think there were no runs scored from like the sixth inning on, and it was still a bust. Baseball's been so good, obviously, that I'm going to have 3 baseball plays today, and I was close to maybe having 4, so I got to get right into it because I only have like 20, 30 minutes or so to get this done here. I'm going to get right into this full baseball slate, which is what we have going on today. It's a Tuesday, so you get the full baseball card. You get a lot of teams returning home from road trips with a day off in a lot of cases. So I think every team that's returning home from a road trip today had yesterday off because the other teams that return home from road trips played yesterday. So that is the case, but I'm pretty much not going to fade like any of these teams, I don't think. The one that I was the closest to fading was the Texas Rangers. I do like the Toronto side in this one. Just the situation I don't think is very good for the Rangers. Both of these teams were off yesterday. Texas was on a road trip, not a long road trip, but they played at Arizona, which was a World Series rematch. Pretty big series. And then they went out to the Pacific Coast for a 4-game series against Seattle. Didn't do well, so that's a division rivalry series, and Seattle was kind of trying to stay alive for the most part there. Texas, for all intents and purposes, is dead, and so is Toronto. So this is a matchup between two teams that know they're not going to make the playoffs. Texas is returning home from that road trip, though, with the day off, which I think exacerbates, as I keep saying recently, that exacerbates the return home spot. It makes it more of a distraction than it otherwise would be. And I think if you're a team that you know you're finished for the season, I think that might even add to the distraction angle a little bit. So I do lean against Texas, even though they are the better of these two teams slightly. Toronto, they're in a more positive spot. They have momentum coming into this because they just swept St. Louis at home, and they get to go out on the road after that sweep. So when you have wins at home and then you go out on the road and you start a road trip, that momentum tends to continue with you onto that road trip. So it is a more positive spot for Toronto. And Chris Bassett is pitching for Toronto, and he's having kind of a down season for what we're used to out of him, really. I mean, he's an older dude, so maybe he's just kind of going off the rails a little bit, but I'm not sure about that. 4.2 ERA, 1.41 whip is really bad. The whip is not good. The ERA is tolerable, but if you look at what he's been doing in the other recent seasons, including last year, a full season with Toronto, his stats are actually pretty good. So I don't think he's just completely fallen off. And if you look at what he's done recently, he's pitched decently over the last few starts after that really bad start against Oakland. He started pitching well again after that. And the one thing about Bassett, well, a couple of things. He is actually good against Texas, or decent against Texas. 68 at-bat sample size. He does have too many walks against him with 8 walks. to the 17 strikeouts. The number of strikeouts is pretty good, but he's held them to a 250 batting average, 608 OPS. So a Texas Rangers lineup that is a decent hitting lineup. Chris Bassett has okay numbers against them. And then if you look at his splits, he actually has pretty crazy home road splits where he's actually way better on the road than he is at home. He's been bad at the Rogers Center this year, the 4.58 home ERA, and his ERA on the road's 3.65. So you'd prefer to be taking Bassett on the road. So again, I leaned to Toronto, but this one was the first game that I left off my card. And of course, if Toronto winds up covering, no, this isn't a spread sport. If Toronto winds up winning the game, I'm going to be pretty angry about it. But the reason I don't think I can quite do it is that Nathan Eovaldi is still the better of these two pitchers in general. He's got the better stats on the season, 3.67 ERA, 1.08 whip. And against Toronto, he does struggle a little bit, but it's against kind of a limited amount of their hitters. So he has a 56 at-bat sample size, but it's only against 5 of Toronto's hitters, but they are kind of the staple hitters there. And Guerrero and Kirk both really do pretty well against him, and the rest of the lineup not so much. But between all that, it amounts to a 9.5 strikeout walk ratio, a 304 batting average, an 807 OPS. So Eovaldi's stats versus Toronto are indeed worse than Bassett's are against Texas. So I do lean to the Toronto side for all those reasons, and it was close to making my card today. There's no real market read on this yet. We don't really see the percentages. Texas is just sitting at a minus 140 favorite. Although I kind of imagine that because Texas they're still the returning World Series champs, despite the fact that they haven't been good this year, I would still kind of imagine they got to be kind of drawing the public action to some extent here, which would be my guess once we see the percentages come out. But I don't know. According to pregame here, Toronto's pitcher is still undecided. So I don't know if that means that Bassett isn't actually starting this game. I think he probably is. I mean, he's listed on ESPN right now, but I guess if Bassett winds up not starting this game, I guess we should not be totally shocked by this. But if you want to take Toronto, like I say with all of these baseball plays, basically they're so dependent on the starting pitching matchup, and most books will do this by default. You want to make sure that part of the bet, ensure that the bet is these two starting pitchers must start, because a lot of it is based on that specific starting pitching matchup. And if they don't start, then the bet just doesn't count. It's a push, and you get your money back. Tenacious Thorn Leon, what's up, man? Are you that Leon, that crazy old dude that we were watching in the homeless dude, basically, that we were watching on Tower Game that one time? You may be. What's up, dude? All right, let's get into my actual plays here. One of these I'm going against the market, and I guess I'll talk about that one first, which is to lay the price with Kansas City, the Kansas City Royals. I don't like what I'm seeing in the market here, and I don't really understand it because I don't really see any good reason to be taking Detroit here, to be honest. Kansas City's down from minus 175 to minus 158, 88% of the tickets on them. They're public because they have the better record, but not by much over Detroit. And 52% of the cash on the other side on Detroit. So it looks like there's a pros versus Joes split on this. And if so, I'm on the side of the Joes in this one, which you don't really want to be. I hope it's not a mistake because my handicapping of this situation leads to a play on Kansas City, man. Both of these teams are fighting for wild card positioning still. So this is a big series. It's a big game for both teams. Yes, it is a little bit bigger for Detroit because Detroit's behind Kansas City. And Detroit, I think, is one of the teams that's probably out of the wild card race right now, if I'm not mistaken. They're sitting like right outside of it, 1.5 games behind the Twins. Kansas City's 2.5 above the Twins. But still, both of these teams kind of need to win these games. So pressure-wise, motivation-wise, it's on both sides here. Let's look at the Kansas City Royals, though, man. They were just on a road trip where they had to play the Yankees, which is obviously a tough series. They weren't that competitive in that series. Well, they won one game, and then they lost the other game, another game by 1. So I guess they were decently competitive there. Then they went to Pittsburgh, and they almost swept Pittsburgh, who are not very good without Paul Skeens on the mound. I don't think they faced Paul Skeens, but I actually took Pittsburgh in the closer of that series because it was Jared Jones for Pittsburgh, who is a decent starting pitcher of theirs, who is unfamiliar to Kansas City, up against not one of Kansas City's best pitchers. I think it might have been Brady Singer. Kansas City dropped that game by 1 run. Then they returned home to play last night against Detroit. And because they were looking ahead to Detroit, that was another reason why I played against them in that last game against Pittsburgh. But that was a tough spot last night to be in that return home spot, man. As I always say, it tends to be a distracted spot. Even if it is a big game against Detroit, it's still kind of tough. Kansas City was actually good early in that game, so they weren't really suffering from the distractions. Then they wound up blowing the lead. They had a decent early lead. They blew it by the middle innings, basically. Detroit had taken the lead, and then Kansas City was not able to do anything after that. Both teams used a lot of their bullpens yesterday, so the bullpen situation, I think, is kind of a wash coming into this game between these two teams. Both teams used 5 relief pitchers. So neither bullpen is in the greatest of shape coming into this, but Kansas City, for one thing, they're way better at home than they are on the road, man. So you want to be looking to play Kansas City at home way more so than you do on the road. They have one of the biggest home-road dichotomies in Major League Baseball. I think it might be the most extreme. Kansas City has one of the best home records in Major League Baseball and one of the worst road records, I think. Even though their overall record is pretty good, they're much better at home. And we're looking at a situation where they just lost the first game coming back home. When a team does that, they lose that first game back home, they tend to be in a more focused, positive spot in the next game, although it tends to be more so if the game is really embarrassing, which last night it was not. It was a close game between division rivals, but still, I think that it does put Kansas City in a positive, bounce-back spot here, a spot to refocus here. And then the starting pitching matchup, I think this is heavily in favor of Kansas City, man. Casey Mize is pitching for Detroit. He is one of the starters towards the end of their rotation. He's not great. 4.47 ERA, 1.40 whip on the season. 71 to 23 strikeout walk ratio isn't that bad, but he's allowed 110 hits in 94 and 2/3 innings. So he has been quite hittable this year. He has not been fooling guys for the most part. Not a high strikeout rate and giving up that many hits. That's not good. His last couple of starts have been difficult. One was against San Diego, but it was on the road. It was a pitching park, but they still hit pretty well. And then his most recent start, home start, didn't do that well, giving up 4 runs and 6 hits, 4 and 2/3 innings against Colorado, who can't really hit well. Away from home, they're not very good. So he kind of struggled in that start. 6.3 ERA across those 2 starts in September. So he's not in the greatest recent form, even though the 9-to-1 strikeout walk ratio looks pretty good. Again, he's not really a strikeout guy. And then look at his stats up against the Kansas City Royals. Decent-sized sample here of 66 at-bats, even though a lot of it is Salvador Perez. Perez there hits him pretty well. But overall, it looks like Kansas City's lineup hits them pretty well. In those 66 at-bats, they have 12 RBIs off him, a whole slew of extra base hits off him. 8-to-1 strikeout walk ratio isn't bad for him, but in a decent-sized sample, Kansas City's hitters hit 439 off him with a 1,099 OPS. So Kansas City's offense hits Mize really well. And then if you look at Mize's stats on the season, his home-road splits, he is significantly worse on the road than he is at home. At home, he has a 4.02 ERA, and on the road, 5.05, and he's allowed a 308 opponent batting average. And I went back and I looked at his stats. I don't have it up right now. On Yahoo, you can see their career stats at particular stadiums. At Kauffman Stadium, which is where this game is in Kansas City, his stats are pretty bad as well. Over, I think, 4 starts in his career at Kansas City, maybe 3, something like that. He has an ERA of over 5 and a whip of over 1.5 at Kansas City in his career. So he has struggled against Kansas City. He struggled at Kansas City, and he struggled on the road this season. Meanwhile, Kansas City, again, I don't really understand the market action here because Kansas City's ace is on the mound, man. Cole Reagans, 3.32 ERA, 1.15 whip. He's been their best starting pitcher. I don't think there's any question about that. He has 211 strikeouts, which is one of the highest strikeout totals in Major League Baseball this year, to 60 walks. So he has been a little bit too wild, but that amount of strikeouts is really high, and 139 hits, all of that in 173 and a third inning. So he's been kind of a workhorse. He's striking out guys at a really high rate, and he's not allowing a lot of hits. So he's fooling guys. I mean, this is ace-like stuff right here, and he's not really been falling off recently as the season progresses. He's had a couple of rough starts in there, but one was against Boston, but he only gave up 1 earned run there. The defense kind of let him down. Not a great start here against Anaheim, allowing 4 earned runs. Not a good offense in Anaheim, but maybe he was just in a spot where he's facing Anaheim in between all these other way better teams. Maybe he lost focus a little bit, and then he didn't have a good start against Houston. allowing 5 earned runs because Houston can definitely hit, but he only allowed 4 hits in that game, 2 walks, and had 10 strikeouts. So that start wasn't all bad either. His 2 most recent starts in September, 14-4 strikeout walk ratio, 1.5 ERA across 12 innings against Minnesota, which is a tough division rivalry, and then at New York, the Yankees, which is not easy to do either. So he's continuing to pitch pretty well. I mean, he's been in decent recent form, I would say. He's been pretty consistent throughout the entire season. And up against Detroit's hitters, he does well against them in a 40 at-bat sample size. They only have 6 hits off him, even though he has walked 8 of them. 14-8 strikeout walk ratio isn't very good, but otherwise, he's held him to a 150 batting average, and still, even including those walks, because he's limited the extra base hits, 517 OPS. So Detroit's hitters have really weak numbers against Reagan's. He is the better pitcher here. So I'm going to take Kansas City, even though the market looks like it's completely against it, and I'm splitting the bet half on the run line and half on the money line because they are such a big favorite here. They're at minus 160 right now. It looks like the line's gone up a little bit. I can only find 166. So you can lay like a -1 run line if you want to, or you can lay the money line, but you really have to pay a lot to do it. The -1 run line, you could probably get at some price that's close to like a -110. So that would basically be like making it a spread bet. So I don't mind that either. But because I have several different books at my disposal here, you can find slightly better numbers if you split the bet and find the best number on each of them. So I'm laying the -1.5 run line for half of the bet at +125. And then the other is -166 on the money line. And that way, I think if Kansas City wins by 1, you're still going to win a small amount of money because the run line will lose at plus money, but your other half will win, and you'll lose less money on the other one because it was a cheaper price. So you'll actually win slightly if they win by 1 if you do it this way rather than a push. So I tend to like that a little bit more, so that's the way I do it. It's more of a grinder approach. No, not hooking up with game man. So that's the first play. That's the more complicated way of playing it. The other ones are more simple. Next up, St. Louis. I'm just going to play this on the money line, even though it's kind of borderline. St. Louis -134 on the money line. That's getting to the type of price where I tend to look towards maybe playing the run line once it gets up like past 130, but still in the -130s. I'm like, all right, I'll just lay the money line here and hope that St. Louis wins the game for me here. I think this is a spot where it's kind of a mismatch, actually, and it actually is kind of misleading, and it looks like it's not a mismatch. This market kind of looks like it's in agreement with me. St. Louis is down from -145 to -135 on the money line, but I see 68% of the tickets on Pittsburgh here. I don't exactly know why, because I'm not even sure Pittsburgh has the better record at this point. They don't, so I really don't understand why that's the case. People just don't believe in St. Louis. Well, maybe they're also looking at the starting pitching matchup, which I mentioned is kind of misleading. 80% of the cash, however, on St. Louis. I like how the spot sets up for St. Louis, for one thing, because Pittsburgh, these teams played last night, and St. Louis was returning home from a road trip, and they did win, but it was only a road trip that took them to Toronto. They got swept. So getting that win yesterday, I think is good because it'll kind of help them start some new positive momentum and break that loss streak that they had at Toronto there. But the other thing is that Paul Skeens pitched last night for Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh this season, the game after Paul Skeens pitches, Pittsburgh doesn't do well. And I don't know if it's because they're just in a letdown spot, a hangover spot, whatever the case may be. The Pirates have a bad record in the game following up a Paul Skeens start. So that's the situation we're in here. And because Andre Palante, who's been shocking everybody, basically, he's been shockingly good for a while now. He pitched well again last night. And even though, St. Louis used a couple of their better relief pitchers here, Pittsburgh's bullpen, I think, is not that good. It might be the worst of the two, really, even though I don't really trust either bullpen. Pittsburgh used more relief pitchers than St. Louis did, and they used them for more pitches as well in yesterday's game. After Paul Skeens had threw a lot of pitches himself, only to get through 6 innings, with 7 strikeouts there. Pittsburgh used 2 additional relievers than St. Louis did. They used 4 to St. Louis's 2. So I think the bullpen situation actually lines up decently for St. Louis here. And then when you look at the starting pitchers, Bailey Falter for Pittsburgh, I think he might be the pitcher with the better ERA out of the two of them, not mistaken. So I think that might be a little bit misleading, actually. Let me see. Between him and Lance Lynn. Oh, no, he's not. Never mind. So I thought this starting pitching matchup was more misleading than it is, although Falter has the better whip, so maybe I'm the one who's being misled. But I don't think so. Falter has a 4.2 ERA, a 1.27 whip. He was pitching decently for a while throughout the season, but over the recent months, he's really seen a drop-off. You see these early months. He had a couple months there. April, May, he had ERAs in the 2s, and then he really started dropping off. July, 5.63 ERA. June, 5.63 ERA. July, 4.91. He had a bit of a gap where he wasn't pitching. I don't know if he was injured or what. He came back, and then August, it started getting worse. 6.53 ERA in the month of August. And yeah, he's done well so far in September, 2.19 ERA, but he only has an 8.5 strikeout walk ratio. So that's kind of a red flag, man. That strikeout walk ratio isn't good. And he did that against Washington and Miami, and they're not very good hitting teams. He's coming off a 2-hit performance against Miami, but again, it's Miami. So I don't know what we can really take away from that. And he was not pitching well before that throughout August. He only went 5 innings in two of the 5 starts in August. Didn't pitch well in August, so he did face some tougher lineups in August. But overall, not great. And then look at his stats against St. Louis in a 37 at-bat sample size. So it's not huge, but it is spread out across most of their lineup. They have a 351 batting average, often with a bunch of extra base hits, 9-3 strikeout walk ratio, and a 1,049 OPS. So that's a high OPS, high batting average. St. Louis's hitters do pretty well against Bailey Falter. And look at Falter's splits, man. His splits, I think, are also not that great. His ERA is also worse on the road, and that's where he is today on the road. This season, 3.75 ERA at home. He's been pretty decent at home. On the road, not as much, 4.73 ERA. So his home road splits, not great either. I mean, a lot of pitchers do pitch better at home, but a lot of times you don't see it skewed that much. And by the way, just because I'll mention it, I forgot to mention it, Cole Reagans actually has slightly better numbers on the road than he does at home, but he has like a 3 ERA in both road and home, so it's not very significant, a split there for Cole Reagans. So I'm still obviously fine playing on him. And then Lance Lynn, on the other hand, for St. Louis, his ERA is decent, 3.96. His whip is not good, 1.36. So I don't know how he's limiting the runs that he's allowed. 104 to 42 strikeout walk ratio isn't that bad, and 109 hits allowed in 111 and a third innings. None of that is really that bad. The walk number is a little bit high, but those stats aren't that bad overall, even though the whip is kind of ugly looking. I don't know. The amount of hits and walks that he's allowed doesn't look that terrible to me, even though, of course, the whip is not very good. He's been pitching okay throughout the season, although he did start not pitching as well in August. And one thing about this is, he did face Pittsburgh in June and then July. That was July. He pitched well in June and July. He pitched against Pittsburgh in June and July. So Pittsburgh does have some recent outings against him, so that might be a slight advantage to Pittsburgh's hitters, maybe. But I don't know if Pittsburgh's offense is that, it's not that good. But also, of course, they're familiar with him. He's been around forever, and he's in their division. So I don't think it really matters that Pittsburgh faced Lance Lynn more recently than St. Louis faced Falter. Both lineups are familiar with both opponents' starting pitchers, so I don't think that really matters. Lance Lynn actually went on the disabled list, basically, or the injured list, and he missed all of August, and he came back on September 11th, he came back, and he had a good return. He pitched well at home against Cincinnati, 7-1 strikeout walk ratio, 1 earned run allowed, 5 innings pitched, 5 hits. So that tells me, as far as recent form, that's all we have to go on, really. And he wasn't pitching badly when he went into that injury. I was going to say injury time out or injury time off from baseball, I guess. And he pitched well in that first start coming out, which veterans a lot of times do. When they come back from being injured, they do tend to put in a good performance because they're a little bit more motivated and they know how to deal with coming back because they've been around for so long. That might be the case with Lance Lynn there, but look at his stats against Pittsburgh, man. A big sample size of 124. So, yes, they are familiar with him, but he's held them down quite a bit. He has a 35-7 career strikeout walk ratio against him. Look at this one with McCutchen, 21-1. That's crazy, dude. So he has a really good strikeout walk ratio against him, and he's held them to a 226 batting average across that large sample size and 574 OPS. So Falter has the significantly worse numbers against St. Louis's hitters than Lance Lynn does against Pittsburgh's hitters. Lance Lynn also does a lot better at home than he does on the road, and Falter does significantly worse on the road than at home, so the splits seem to line up here as well. Lance Lynn this season has a 3.3 home ERA, holding opponents to a 2.16 batting average there, and on the road he's been way worse, so the 4.81 ERA, 289 batting average on the road, so he's way better at home as well, so I like this. So I'm playing Lance Lynn. The market looks like it is in agreement with it. You can lay minus 134 on St. Louis right now. If you want to find a run line, play that. Maybe do like a run line split like I did on the other game. I don't blame you. You could do that too if you want. And then to finish this up before I get out of here, I am going to be on a total. Of course, it's an under because you know me. I play a lot of unders. I know there are guys who are successful finding spots to take overs, but the over is a more public play, although it is baseball where the public gets less involved. So you don't want to just avoid overs necessarily, but I'm playing on the Yankees-Seattle under the total. This is my bread and butter, man. I feel like I play so many unders in games that are at Seattle, but it makes sense because it's a pitcher-friendly park. Seattle is a team that doesn't have a good offense at all, and they have a really good starting pitching rotation. So it all kind of works out. The Yankees and Seattle, neither of them played yesterday, so that helps as well. Both teams have a day off, so their bullpens are rested. So that's good. Seattle didn't travel anywhere, so I think the no travel actually does help the offense a little bit. But with Seattle's offense, you can really only do so much. And the Yankees are indeed traveling. I think they're actually going out on the road. So as far as the side, I don't know which way I would lean as far as the side, but that's why I'm going total, man, because I like both starting pitchers here. Yankees are coming off a pretty big series where they basically ended my Red Sox season, which is I'm extremely sad about it. It was a big series for both teams. The Yankees are coming off that, so I don't know. And they're having to travel out to the West Coast, but it is to start a road trip. So whatever you think about the side, I don't know. We're looking total here. Both teams have rested bullpens here, which is good. I think Luis Gil is pitching for the Yankees, and he had some spots. He had a few speed bumps in the middle of the season, but overall his stats are really good. 3.18 ERA, 1.17 whip. His problem is he's too wild. That's a lot of walks. He's like almost unhittable, though. 156 strikeouts and 135 2/3 innings is pretty good. That's a lot of strikeouts. Only 89 hits allowed. He does not allow a lot of hits, but he has 70 walks. That is way too many walks, but his whip is still really good because he allows so few hits. He's allowed almost as many walks as hits, which is crazy. So he is wild, but he has good stuff. He strikes out a lot of guys. He's able to fool a lot of guys, but the wildness is crazy, but he's also almost unhittable. So he's just one of those stereotypical wild pitchers, but it has been successful for him. I mean, he had a 0.7 ERA for an entire month in May. Then in June, he did terribly. That was the speed bump I was talking about with those two really bad starts against Baltimore and the Mets there. Two offenses that can hit, though. 6.45 ERA there. But since then, he kind of returned to form in July, 3.33 ERA, and then he was bad again in August. So I don't like that. I mean, that August was bad, including a bad start against the White Sox. I don't know what that was, a 12-2 loss. That was a weird start for him. I think that was they were against Kai Busch in that one, and that was a start where Kai Busch, it was like his second start ever in the majors. I think he walked 7 guys in like 2 innings, and the Yankees still only scored 2 runs off him. I don't know what that was. Gil didn't do well that month at all. He had more walks than strikeouts in the month of August, so that worries me slightly. But then, I don't know, he didn't have to pitch that many starts in the month of August. Usually you see guys go 4 or 5 times. I think they kind of spread out his starts a little bit, or he had a little bit of time where he was injured maybe or something, or they skipped a start because he should have had one other start in here. But whatever it was, that break seems to have helped him because he's bounced back in the month of September with 2 good starts where he's gone at least 5 innings, and both of them allowed 1 run total across 11 innings pitched, 6 hits allowed, 12-4 strikeout walk ratio. So that's a bit of a return to form for him with a .82 ERA. So he's pitching better recently again after he got that break. So he came back from that break. So you have Lance Lynn coming back from being injured and pitched well in the first game back. Gil got a little bit of a break, and he's pitched well since he came back. So I like both of those scenarios. And then up against Seattle's hitters, he's been really good against Seattle's hitters in a 32 at-bat sample size, 13-3 strikeout walk ratio, only 1 extra base hit, a home run from Polanco, because of course it is. But he's held them to 3 hits, including that home run, an .094 batting average and .359 OPS. Seattle's hitters have really struggled against Gil. So he has really good numbers against them. Seattle's hitters aren't very good, so they don't exactly have the capability to take that much advantage. Then on the other side, Brian Wu, I mean, he's a guy I continue to play either on him or on unders in games where he's playing. And I think I was on him in his last start where he did have a perfect game against San Diego going into the 6th inning or into the 7th inning, I guess, where he kind of lost it and gave up a couple hits and a couple runs. Does that mean he's going to be in like a letdown spot here? I don't really think so because it's the Yankees. I mean, it's a huge game, even though Seattle's probably out of it. They're still not technically eliminated. And you have the Yankees coming into your house, man. I think you're going to want to step it up. So I think Wu is going to do that. And he's been very consistent this year with a 2.38 ERA, 0.82 whip, and this is his second season in the majors. He's putting up really nice stats. He has some of the best control in the majors. As you can see here, he only has 10 walks on the entire season, 82 strikeouts. Not a huge strikeout pitcher, but that ratio is really good. He walks so few guys, and he doesn't allow a lot of hits either. 77 hits in 105 2/3 innings, so he's putting very few men on base, man. His command is excellent, and it's been that way throughout the entire season pretty much. He allowed 4 runs here in this bad start against Anaheim, had another bad start against Anaheim where he allowed 4 earned runs in it. Like I said last time with Wu, if you throw out the 2 starts, which are both on the road in Anaheim, take his entire season, excluding the 2 starts at Anaheim, and he hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any start. He is continuing to pitch well over those 2 starts in this month. 11-1 strikeout walk ratio, 3.09 ERA, 10 hits allowed in 11 2/3. That's all good, and he does have some history against the Yankees, which does mean the Yankees are more familiar with him, so they have faced him before. I'd prefer it if they hadn't faced him before, but I don't mind this either because the Yankees in a 28 at-bat sample size, as good as their offense is, they haven't done well against Wu. They only have 4 hits off him, 1 extra base hit, a double by Verdugo. He's got a 10-2 strikeout walk ratio against them, 143 batting average and 379 OPS. So both starting lineups in this matchup have really weak offensive numbers against these opposing starters. You have the bullpens rested. So I like that one as well, and you can still find it. You want to get the key number 7 here, man, to play this under, because I do see under 6.5 at plus money too, but I really prefer the 7. As I always mention, it's a key number in baseball, because when you have the 3-3 tie, you need 1 run to break the tie, so that's the 7. So you want to get the 7 if you can. I found it at under 7 at minus 105, so still a reduced juice price. So those plays, once again, are Kansas City split on the run line, minus 1.5 runs, plus 125, and the other half of the bet, half and half on minus 166 on the money line. St. Louis Cardinals, minus 134 on the money line, and New York Yankees, Seattle Mariners, under 7, minus 105. Whew, man. I get heartburn. I get like allergies kicking in, man. I'm sniffling, I'm belching, I'm like about to vomit every time I do one of these. Have to do it every day, man. Sports are gay. That is very true, actually, especially baseball at this point, right? Baseball used to be a much more manly sport where it was, you had guys drinking beer and eating fried chicken in the clubhouse, guys doing steroids. Like, we want to bring that back. Bring back the 90s steroid era of baseball, man. It was much more entertaining, but even so, I'm going to try to make money on baseball. It has not been the best baseball season for me, but I think I am on like a 7-2 baseball run or something like that. And I'm doing well in football, man. I had a 3-0 NFL weekend this week, so football is doing all right for me so far, and I want that to continue. I've been moving up, and I'm only like I said, I'm only, I think, $1,000 off of breaking even on the year now. It's been up and down year, man, but I want to at least get back into the black on this year, which has kind of been a lost year for me after 2 massive years. The previous 2 years, I had my best 2 years ever, and this year has been a decline, but what can you do? It's kind of the law of averages type of thing. Have a good day, man. I got to get out of here. I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter, obviously. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. We're going to be back with you tomorrow night. The most offensive comedy podcast on the planet and one of the most hilarious, We're on every Wednesday, 9-11 p.m. We're on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. We do all that stuff live. We're trying to focus on the Rumble. Go check us out there. I think it's surpassing the YouTube numbers now, because YouTube, we only use it to live stream because we can't leave our stuff up on YouTube, but we are still there. I put the episodes all up on Spotify and the audio platforms as well after the fact. go follow us out and go subscribe to the Tower Gang Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You can give us some support, and we're giving you extra content now. You get bonus pre-shows, which we do live. You can come into the chat, and you can see us trying to set it up and me getting all aggravated because nobody's paying attention and nobody's there on time. You can watch the post show as well. That's bonus content. We do that live right after the main show. It's extra content, basically, so you just get extra content from us there. Go check all that out, and you get to hang out in a Telegram with us and chat. I have a betting channel on there. I should get a little bit more involved in there than I am. I drop in like a couple times a week usually at this point. That's going to do it for me, man. Have a good day. I'm Tower Gang Toad once again. Peace. Let's get some baseball wins today and enjoy the sports. And I'll be back with football videos because it never ends when it's football week, man. We got football coming every week. We're going to have college football week 4, and we're going to have NFL week 3 coming at you. Peace. Thanks for hanging out, guys.